We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hey everybody, this is Paula Schaffner with episode 22, Mork Runs Down. This first aired on April 12th, 1979. The IMDb synopsis is, on Mork's birthday, he gets so run down that he forgets he has to recharge his body with an egg-like gleek. This was directed by Howard Storm, his 14th of 59. It was written by Ben Starr, who wrote for a lot of sitcoms between the 50s and the 80s, including The Brady Bunch and All the Family, but this was his only Mork and Mindy script. We start with an exterior of the house, but we have Orson calling Mork, and he sounds increasingly desperate and eventually tells him to activate his receiver mode and come in, please. Mork points out that Orson never calls him. He says, "What's up, sweetheart, darling, baby?" And I think it's meant more like a Hollywood kind of thing than Orson being his boyfriend or something. Orson has something very important to tell Mork. Mork guesses that it's heavy news and then does his bark laugh because he's making fun of Orson's weight. Orson says Mork is about to have a birthday. Mork realizes this will be his first. Orson tells him not to panic.
Everything will be just fine if you do what I say.
Why did it have to happen to me? Couldn't someone else have had my first birthday?
Calm down.
Thanks. I needed that.
Every organ has to go through this. Mork, meet your gleek.
Leak?
Now, on your birthday, you'll begin to run down. You'll speed up. You'll slow down. You'll have trouble talking. You'll act weird. You'll act weirder. Don't shake the gleek. You'll deactivate the chemicals.
Sorry, your fatitude.
That gleek must be in perfect working order when you hit it against your head to recharge yourself.
Mork says he'll guard the gleek as if his life depended on it. Orson says his life does depend on it. Mork says no pressure. Mork says that he has a new job at a kennel which is populated with small creatures just like Venusians, only smaller. Orson says it's lucky that Mork speaks Venusian. Mork growls and barks. And I can't remember if we had a thing with Venusians being like dogs before, but this will become ironic on the Mork and Mindy wedding episode in season 4. In the next scene, Mindy is sitting on the couch with a woman who's probably her age or a little bit older. This woman has glasses and a perm, a crocheted vest, jeans, and boots. Mindy says she's so glad to see her again, and the woman agrees and says that 3 months is too long for friends like them to be apart. She asks Mindy, "Did you know that if we were snails, we'd already be dead?" So we get the immediate impression that this woman is probably at least eccentric. Mindy says that so much has happened since they last saw each other, and I'm not sure when this episode is set and how much of what's going on in Mindy's life she could actually tell this friend about, although I guess she could talk about her college classes. She calls the woman Joyce, and the woman says her name isn't Joyce anymore, it's Rainbow. Mindy offers her coffee, but Rainbow objects to the caffeine. Mindy offers a soft drink, and Rainbow says that sugar is suicide. Mindy offers water, and Rainbow objects to the fluorides. She would like a beer. She agrees that it does have chemicals, but after a six-pack, who cares? Mork comes home and the audience applauds. Mindy introduces him to her good friend Rainbow. Although you would think if she's really that good a friend, he would have met her some point 3 months ago. Rainbow does the peace sign, so he says he'll double it, and he does the nanu-nanu handshake. Rainbow says that she likes Mork already. She gets tired of that hippie handshake and the people who keep saying the same boring cliches. And then she asks Mork what his sign is, and this time he doesn't answer.
I think Mork's a moonchild.
Oh, come on, Mindy. You know moonchildren are only this big with mold on their heads and terrible acne.
Mindy asks about Mork's first day at the kennel, and he says he doesn't know why they call it work when it was so easy. They told him to take the dogs for a walk, but because the dogs could walk by themselves, he let them out. He told them to be back by midnight. Mindy says they'll never come back, and he says that they promised him. So this is actually a little bit like the Mork the Gullible episode where it was a prisoner that he released. We don't find out anything further about the kennel, and Mindy tells him to not bother going back there tomorrow. She tells Rainbow that Mork has had a hard time finding a job. Rainbow runs a health food store, and she's been looking for a revolutionary moonchild stock boy. She wonders if he'd like to try it, and he says, "Does a Martian have 8 legs?" We don't know what she replies because the scene ends. Then we get a daytime exterior of the house. Mork comes down the ladder from the attic, and he's singing an Orkin version of Camptown Races. He's wearing a rope, not quite around his neck, but kind of hanging down from his neck. I've got to be honest that it's extra disturbing, knowing that Robin Williams would later commit suicide with a belt tied around his neck. He waters a plant and tells it, "I still respect you." So like I said, that is a recurring joke of him saying that to objects.
Oh, none for you until you finish that bologna sandwich I gave you the other day. When I think of all the starving plants in Asia. What? You don't eat meat? Oh, you're a humanitarian. What? Then I'll fix you a salad next time. Oh, sorry, might be somebody you know. Forgive me. There's the phone. Shut up. I know what it was. Give me a chance. I don't know who that is. Give me more. I'm okay. I'll get it. Everybody off! Everybody off! Hello. Goodbye. Hello. Goodbye. Jive, turkey.
And this is more about Mork and baloney, of course. He realizes that he needs to recharge with his gleek, so he goes over to the wardrobe and he gets the gleek out and it lights up and beeps. He says, "Gleek, don't fail me now." And this is a recurring pun with Mork and I think Robin Williams in general, playing on "feet don't fail me now." I know that there's at least one instance where he says, "Fetus, don't fail me now." He hits his forehead with the gleek, but it doesn't help. He realizes that it's not time to recharge yet. He has to wait 2 more hours. So they're very precise about these birthdays, even though they're measured in vast amounts of time. He sets the alarm on his ankle watch, and of course we had seen the ankle watch in a couple of earlier episodes. He says he can't let the gleek out of his sight. If he does, he'll be up the Milky Way without a paddle. When Mindy comes in, he tells her to get the phone, and he argues with himself a little bit. And this is a recurring thing in this episode. I felt it was not done as well as in Mork's Mixed Emotions, but it's showing how sick he is. She picks up the phone and says nobody's there, and he says that the same thing happened to him. He argues with himself a little bit more. He goes over to the phone and sets the gleek on the counter. He calls the dial tone a dirt ball and makes the sound back at it. Mindy tells him to stop kidding around. She notices the rope, and he says it serves a very important purpose. But he briefly dozes off and he can't remember what the rope is for. She asks if he's all right, and he says he had trouble sleeping last night. He tossed and turned, and of course that's difficult because he sleeps hanging from a bar. She suggests he go crash for a while. He says he's not into pain, but a nap will help. He heads upstairs. She notices the gleek and puts it in the fridge. Mork remembers what the rope is for and he runs downstairs. He says it's an old Orkin custom. When they want to remember something, they tie a rope around their neck. She says on Earth we tie a string around our little finger. He says on Ork that's how they used to hang cattle rustlers. Apparently they have cattle on Ork, although I don't know that it's necessarily steer. Mork can't remember what he's supposed to remember. Mindy assumes it's his interview at the vitamin vendor. He thanks her and takes off the rope. He says now he doesn't have to worry about ring around the rope, which is reference to the famous ring around the collar detergent ads. She wishes him luck and tries to shake hands with him, but he keeps offering her the wrong hands. She tells him to not do tricks like that at the interview. She leaves and he says ciao. He feels dizzy and he leans sideways. He says either he's sick or he's at Pisa, as in the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And then he thinks he's all right now. He takes his temperature by putting his hand a little bit down his pants, but like around his navel, and he says he doesn't have a fever. He wishes he could remember what he's supposed to do. He says he'll play back the tape, and so then he kind of rewinds himself and goes over the plants. He notices that the big plant still hasn't eaten the sandwich, and he wants it to grow up big and strong like its father, Fern, as in the name Fern. And then food reminds him of the gleek.
Oh, if I forgot my gleek, that'd be a disaster if I fail to recharge myself. If I don't recharge, I slow down, I speed up, my memory goes, I slow down, I speed up, my memory goes. Wow, deja vu, I feel like I've been here before.
He argues with himself again and says something about signing the contract. The phone rings, and Mork laughs and says he's not going to fall for that old phone trick. He opens the door and says, "Come in." We get a really nice exterior of the Boulder Mall, and this time it's showing off the mountains. Fred is selling something to a young blonde couple and he thanks them. I would say in general, the music store seems to be doing better than it was early in the season when business was pretty bad, but it's not really a focus. Eugene and Cora enter from the practice room. He thanks Mrs. Hudson because his violin sounds a lot better now, and it turns out she shook his pet turtle out of it. I think he had a lizard that died, so maybe this is his replacement pet. And it must have been a really tiny turtle to fit in a violin. Cora is going to lunch. It's the new Continental Cafe called Chez Eddie. So I don't know if that replaced the diner where Mork ran into the bully. She says that all the French truck drivers eat there. Eugene says he has to hang around here because his mom won't be picking him up for another hour. So I guess in the past his mom has picked him up and we just haven't seen her. Cora offers him a ride home.
Okay, on one condition. This time you don't pop any wheelies.
So long, folks.
Okay, have a nice lunch, Graham.
That's the last we see of Eugene for this series, even though there are still a couple more episodes for this season. Again, I just want to say it was really nice having this Gen X character on the show. They will have more to interact with children in future episodes, but I like that he was a sounding board character, and we got a little bit of backstory on him. I thought Jeffrey Jacquet, and again, I still don't know quite how to pronounce that, did a nice job with the character, very down-to-earth and likable. He was one of the characters I would miss when season 2 started, but I'll talk about that more later. As for Cora, that is it for her in this episode. And they have her playing into that late 60s into, I would say, early 80s cliche of the wild granny kind of character, like on Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, riding a motorcycle. And I think this also is a little bit to Ruth Gordon's persona in the 70s. As far as I know, this is the only episode where they mention Cora having a motorcycle. Fred tells Mindy that her grandmother is always out to lunch. So this is a dig of his against Cora. We haven't really had them insulting each other in a while, so this surprised me that they threw that in, and it wasn't face-to-face. Mork comes in, and he's kind of dazed, and there's again applause when he enters, so that was usually a measure of how popular a character was, how much studio reaction you got, especially in 70s and early 80s shows. If people applauded when they entered. Not on every sitcom, but definitely on the Gary Marshall sitcoms. Mindy asks what Mork is doing here, and he says he has an interview. She says it's at the vitamin vendor. Mork says he doesn't feel too well. She says he looks fine now. He says it comes, and then he dozes off, and then he says it goes. He imitates a crow and then a hunter. Mindy thinks he might need a doctor. When he falls asleep on his feet, Fred asks if this is normal for him, and with a straight face she says not at all. Normally he sleeps hanging from a bar. So we haven't seen that circus swing bed in a while, but I like that there are those callbacks in this episode.
Jolly, could have been a contender. Oh, feeling good now. Crunching meat now. Sucking eggs.
Fred runs out to get a doctor in the mall. Mork kind of wakes up and he slumps, but he wonders who took his bones. Mindy turns off his ankle watch when the alarm goes off, and then she asks about the little piece of paper that was attached. He says it must be a footnote, and there's applause, and I have to say it was one of the best jokes in the episode.
It says, Dear Mork, just a reminder, if you don't use your gleek, you'll be dead in 1 hour. Love, Mork.
Well,
We get a different exterior of the mall. It's close enough up that we can see some shoppers, so that's nice. Mindy asks Mork what a gleek is. He says he doesn't know, and he doesn't know what the note means. She has him read it, and he sees that he's going to be dead, and he says, "Oh, I miss me."
oh no. I'm gonna die. Heavy sigh, anxiety, anger mixed with inner turmoil. Oh no, I'm seeing my whole life flash before me. No big deal. I've got so much to do, there's only an hour left. Wait. Da, 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 da. At last, a cure for acne. I'd like to thank the Academy. No one helped me get this award.
What are you doing?
I've only got an hour left, Mindy, and I want to reach for all the gusto I can. Oh, if only there were an hour and 10 minutes. Mindy, what are you doing after the funeral?
Oh, Mork, stop.
No, don't stop me now. I'm full of real zest for life. Oh.
And yes, it's ironic that Robin Williams would later be nominated for Oscars and eventually win for Good Will Hunting. And yes, I have to remark on the smuttiness of the line about him wishing that they had an hour and 10 minutes, implying that he could have sex with her in 10 minutes. Although, because it's Mork, we don't know if he really knows what sex is yet. Mindy says that her father is getting a doctor and she refers to him as Daddy, which she was doing more early on this season and I think is a sign of how scared she is, that she's looking for reassurance from her father. Mork starts to remember and then he forgets, and then Fred comes in with a young doctor in a suit with a white coat and carrying a doctor's bag. The doctor has a duck hand puppet and refers to himself as Dr. Ducky. He's surprised that Mork isn't a child. He introduces himself and says that he's a pediatrician. Fred says it was either him or the foot doctor. The doctor says that he's a professional, and then he tells Mork to open for Mr. Mercury. Mork acts like the thermometer is a blow dart. The doctor thinks that Mork is obviously hyperactive and somewhat sluggish. When he finds out that Mork's temperature is 63 degrees, he says this isn't possible. Then he brings out Benny the Bunny and his magic stethoscope, which has bunny ears. He says that it works just like a real stethoscope. Mork yells into it. The doctor says, either I have a defective bunny or this man's heart is stopped, which is a variation on a Groucho Marx line. Fred insists they tell the doctor the truth about Mork in order to save Mork's life. So Mindy hesitantly says that Mork hasn't been here long. He's an alien from another planet. The doctor thinks this is a practical joke. He doesn't know how they tampered with his instruments, but he says, my Mr. Mercury and my bunny were working before I came here. And then he says, nobody makes a fool of Dr. Ducky. He storms out and the audience applauds. Dr. Benton Phillips was played by Henry Pollock II, who was often a voice actor. I most recognize him from his recurring role on Webster. Mindy is understandably very upset about Mork's condition, and she again calls Fred Daddy. He hugs her and says that everything's going to be all right. But she's the one who thinks of calling an ambulance. Fred again tries to reassure her. Mork wakes up as she's calling, and he exits without them noticing. She says that it's an emergency and a man is dying, but she agrees to hold. And then she notices Mork is gone, so she hangs up. At that time, may have talked about this on a previous episode, they didn't trace calls. Maybe they thought it was a practical joke. I don't know. They wonder where Mork could be, and she thinks maybe he went to the apartment or to the interview. Fred wonders why he would go to the interview when he has only an hour to live. She says that Mork's mind isn't working right, and he is dying to get a job, and then she regrets saying that, not having meant it in that way. Then we go to the health food store, and Rainbow is talking to an owl in a cage, and she tells it if he can't handle drugs, he shouldn't do them. And then she says, what do you mean I don't give a hoot? Mork enters, so she tells the owl that they'll rap later, using the 60s term for talk. She says, hi Mork, hear about the job? And he says, no, what are they saying? With a pun on the two types of hear.
I can dig your whole essence. I could get right into your space where you're coming from and where you're at.
Well, is it quitting time? I don't feel too well.
Maybe it's a nutrition thing. Like maybe your potassium is in an imbalance with your blood sugar. You know, when that happens to me, I go straight for a Snickers bar.
So again, even though she works in a health food store and she's a hippie, she not only drinks beer, but she eats Snickers. A young blonde man comes in and she wants Mork to wait on him. Mork asks how long he should wait. She says, time is money and time is relative. Just see what he wants. And he says, wow, reality, what a concept. So that's the second reference to his catchphrase, which became the title of one of his albums. The customer asks if Mork has wheat germ, and Mork says he hopes not, and he acts like he's getting the germs off himself. The customer says that the doctor says he needs more iron, so Mork suggests that he eat car keys. The customer asks if he has any clover honey, and Mork says, all check, sweetheart. A lot of Mork calling men sweetheart in this episode. The customer decides to just get some vitamins. So he first says A, and Mork does the Fonzie A with his thumbs. And when the customer asks for B12, Mork acts out a World War II plane attacking the Japanese. Rainbow says that her friend's biorhythms are the pits today. And technically, Mork isn't her friend yet, but okay. She wants Mork to get a bottle of vitamin A, and that's that bottle with green pills.
So anyway, I feel in addition to vitamins, a person should get a lot of exercise. Like I'm into transcendental tennis.
Transcendental tennis.
Yeah, we don't believe in actually hitting the ball. We just kind of relate
Look,
to
could you please hurry it up?
I don't know. It was my fault.
Here's one.
No. If this is what vitamins do to you, I'm going back to junk food.
Thanks, come again.
I don't know why the bottle isn't sealed. I mean, obviously, so that the pills could spill out, but practically that seems like an odd thing to do in a health food store. Rainbow thinks that there's something really wrong with Mork. He finds some eggs, and he says, everything's brown gleeks. And she says that's the title of her favorite Rod McEwen album. And I looked this up, there wasn't anything close to that, but a lot of Rod McEwen albums have these nature, pseudo-profound kind of titles. Mork keeps picking up the eggs and saying gleek and recharge. Mindy comes in and has Rainbow help her get Mork out to the car. Rainbow was played by Susan Elliott, who doesn't have a lot of IMDb credits, but she would go on to do a Bosom Buddies episode. The nameless customer in this scene is played by Michael Donaghy. It's one of only 2 acting roles listed. He was mostly a producer. And of course the customers that Fred waited on don't have any lines. And they're just extras and we don't know anything about them. We get another daytime exterior of the house, and Fred is on the phone saying no a bunch of times. And he explains he's not looking for the vitamin bender, he's looking for the vitamin vendor. And he spells out vendor using less and less of the word, like he's doing the song, and bingo was his name-o. Mindy brings Mork in, and Fred says that he thought Mindy was going to take Mork to the hospital. She says that Mork insisted on coming home. He has to find something. It's called a gleek. Mork imitates bloodhounds and goes around the apartment, and then he collapses. They get him to the couch. It's almost 1:30, and if they don't find out what a gleek is in the next 10 minutes, he doesn't stand a chance. So then he chants Hare Krishna. So a quick comment on the timeline. If it's around 1:30, that means that the scene where Mork started to run down must have been around 11:30, so then he went down to the store and Cora was about to go to lunch. We did not see Fred and Mindy lock up the store, and so hopefully they're not being robbed while running around town. Obviously Mork's life is important, but it felt a little bit careless to me. They try to calm him down, but he walks backwards because he has no sense of direction. Fred decides to try something he saw on a TV show, and so he pinches Mork on the shoulder, and it works, and Mork loses consciousness. And I'm not sure if this is a reference to the Vulcan nerve pinch. Mindy asks what's wrong, and Mork says it's his birthday, and she is upset about this because he's saying it as a terrible thing, and then they wonder what's so bad about a birthday. He says on Orc, a birthday comes only every 2,000 zymes. I already went through this whole thing for almost a season, trying to figure out what a bleem is, and now you're throwing zyme at me. Back on My Favorite Orkin, Mork said that the hull attacker against Fonzie was the best he'd had in 20 bleems. So that's 40,000 years, if a bleem is 2,000 years. A zyme, I'm guessing, is smaller than a bleem. And again, there was a point where a bleem seemed like it was only a year, so I don't know how to take any of this. But maybe they realized that they didn't want to give an exact age for Mork, and so instead of defaulting to bleem, they went with this new term, zyme, which is like time, but with a Z. Mork says that when it's an Orkin's birthday, their bodies go shazbot, and they get the gorgles. Fred worries that these are contagious, but Mork says that the gorgles are more like what you Earthlings call dying. He speaks very slowly and says that gleeks are an energy source used to recharge. Mindy keeps asking what they look like.
Give us a clue. How big is it?
I think he's trying to tell us something.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a Lassie movie. A gleek is a chicken.
It's a bald chicken.
A bald chicken. No. Egghead. It's an egghead. It's an egg. A gleek is an egg. It's an egg.
of nice that Fred's baldness came in handy as a clue. Mindy remembers finding an egg on the counter and putting it in the fridge. Fred assures Mork that after he gets his gleek, his gorbles will be gone, and then Fred says he can't believe he said that. Mindy brings over an open carton of eggs.
Let me get something straight. He's from a more advanced society? Gleek! Gleek! Greetings! Any calls for me while I was out?
Now we have a nighttime exterior of the house, and Mork is calling Orson. Then in his mind, he's looking through his hands like binoculars. Orson asks if Mork made it through his birthday, and he doesn't seem terribly concerned, considering how worried he was at the beginning of the episode. And Mork doesn't tell him about all the drama with the gleek. Instead, he says that they threw a strange ceremony for him. They made a cake and it caught on fire. Mork says he stomped that sucker right out, and Orson tells him good work. Orson says that now that Mork's getting older, he's got to settle down. Mork says since he's on Earth, he's not a BLE major anymore. So I guess if you're a BLEM old, you're like an adolescent? I don't know, what are they doing to me with their weird math? Mork worries that now he'll have to get boring, and Orson says no, not boring, just more like Orson, which obviously is not reassuring. Mork jokes that he better keep eating Zeppelins for breakfast, and then he does his bark laugh. Orson tells him to stop acting like a child.
You have to start calming down.
Oh, contraire, mon grandiose. The dullest people on earth are the ones who think that they have to calm down and set a pattern for themselves as they grow older. And that pattern dictates what they should be. It gives them very little freedom to be who they are.
But everyone knows that as you grow older, you become more serious.
Ah, but isn't it true, sir? No matter how many years you have to keep just a touch of the child in you, a little bit of the mondo bozo. You never feel old.
So besides the very Robin Williams-like philosophy of trying to keep a childlike side to yourself, this is notable for Mork using French with au contraire, and it's another example of him using mondo and bozo, putting them together this time. And when he does his sign-off, he squeaks at the end. This is an episode I can remember being annoyed by at the time, and that is directly due to Rainbow. And I think my objection at the age of 11 was that the hippie character felt really dated. Obviously, there were still hippies around in 1979. In a sense, hippies never left us, but it felt a little bit cringy to me. So when I was watching it today, I did try and give Rainbow a fair chance. Oh, and I do have to note that they gave her a name that fits in with Mork's image. I think Susan Elliott does an okay job, but it is a very cliched character. They kind of give it some weird spins, like her talking to the owl and all that. I just didn't really find any of the guest stars that memorable. They're doing what they're supposed to do, the customer and Rainbow and the doctor, but they just felt like types rather than individuals. And if you contrast this with what, I'm going to go back to Bill Kirchenbauer, although he was playing a stereotypical character, he did just some fun spins on it. Dana Hill, at her young age, did a Girl Scout that was just a very memorable Girl Scout, and this is just one of those episodes where the guest stars are there, they're functional, but they didn't really bring anything extra. And I did feel like this episode was somewhat of a retread of Mork's mixed emotions. And it's also one of those episodes where Mindy is worried about Mork's health and or safety. Although it was nice to see her concern for him, I kind of had this, we've seen this before, deja vu, as Mork would say. It wasn't much of a farewell for Eugene. Cora, it's like they're trying to give her interesting exit lines, but they're not giving her actual plots or subplots. There was some nice Fred stuff. I mean, Mindy was the one who came up with all the solutions, but bless him, at least Fred was concerned. He really does care about Mork, and that is something that is developed through this season, so I appreciated that. It's another of these recent episodes where the structure feels off. For instance, we have a whole thing of Mork working in a kennel, and it's just a throwaway. We don't see him with the dogs. There's no callback to it later. He just has this off-screen job that he manages to lose in one day. And also, now Mork is looking for a job, and that wasn't an issue early on in the series, although I guess now he's a little more acclimated to Earth and so he can pass better. But again, I still don't know, what about his paperwork, and how does he get through that? Sometimes I really struggle with what score to give on the 0 to 4 egg scale, and this is a Gleek episode. It measures how well an episode fulfills what I'm looking for in the series. And this early on, I thought, oh, this is a 2.5. And it stayed there. It was just a really easy call for me. And then I also measured these episodes on a 0 to 4 heart scale. And that is how well it promotes or supports a Mork and Mindy romantic relationship. There is that line about how he would spend an extra 10 minutes. And obviously there is her really caring about him and worrying about him, but not a particularly romantic episode as such. So I'll go with the 1. I wouldn't say it's a hilarious episode. I wouldn't say it's a necessary episode, but it's not painful. 2.5 eggs, 1 heart. This is Paula Schaffner with episode 22, Mork Runs Down Nanu Nanu.
You know I love that organic cooking. I always ask for more. And they call me Mr. Natural, on down to the health food store. I only eat good sea salt, white sugar don't touch my lips. And my friends is always begging me to take them on macrobiotic trips. Yes, they are. Oh, but night I take out my strong box that I keep under lock and key. And I take it off to my closet where nobody else can see. I open that door so slowly, take a peek up north and south. Then I pull out a Hostess Twinkie and I pop it in my mouth. Yeah, in the daytime I'm Mr. Natural, just as healthy as I can be. But at night I'm a junk food junkie. Good Lord, have pity on me.